Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sports on Screen podcast. Today we have a very special episode. I'm joined with Ryan Hall.
Hi mate, you alright?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah,
How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
So Ryan is a rugby player, and today we're going to be speaking a little bit about his life. So let's get started. Ryan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Ryan. I'm 20 years old. I've played rugby for about 15, 16 years. Turned professional when I was 16 with Hull KR, and then played a bit of championship with Hunslet and Bradford. And that's where I'm at now.
Okay, so let's start with the very first thing you can remember. Growing up, you're from Hull, it's a very big rugby league place, very big sporting place. What was it like being born in an environment like that? Was you always going to play a sport like rugby, or did you have other sports?
No, it was always rugby. When my dad was a kid, he cycled a lot, and I had a lot of sisters. I was the only boy in my family, so my sisters always played netball and dance and stuff, but I'm not that coordinated. So I grew up on an estate in Westall, right next to my amateur club Westall, which is quite useful. So I was only about 2 minutes walking distance from it. And I remember my dad taking me on my 4th birthday, which will have been over 16 years now. And from minute one I loved it. Spent the best part of 12 years at Westall before I signed for KR, and it all just took off from there.
I think I've read somewhere that you've got a couple of uncles, family members that have been involved in professional rugby. What was it like having figures like that around you?
Yeah,
what did that do for you?
It was good. So I had my uncle Robin, played for KR, which is quite fitting, so obviously they're the Robins. And then his brother was the chairman of Hull KR in the 80s when they had a lot of success, so it meant a lot when I signed there. So there's a lot of history in and around that, and to be able to take that legacy onto another generation, I think meant a lot to them and to me.
Would you say that they're like a big inspiration, a big part of your journey in rugby then?
Yeah, I'd say so. I remember meeting them when I was probably about 8 or 9. And hearing all the stories that they'd been, because obviously they played against Australia and played cup finals, and the sort of memories that they'd made, I know definitely that's what I wanted to do when I was older. And to be able to have that voice that could tell me how to get there was, pivotal and helping me get to where I am today.
So going into your very first rugby team then, what was that like? Who was it, and what age were you when you very first started?
Was that when I was a kid?
Yeah. First amateur club.
Yeah, no, it was good. I've played a lot of mates I went to school with, and obviously because I grew up on the estate, there was a lot of kids that I was neighbours with. There's still lads I keep in touch with now, all these years later. I remember one lad that moved to Australia. I've been and visited him a couple of times, and I ended up turning pro with a few of the other ones. There's people like my mate Josh, and we all kind of went to Hull KR together, and made a bit of a name for ourselves individually. But we all remember where we came from, and we made some great memories. We toured France, we toured Australia. We did quite a lot as an amateur team. We had quite a lot of success. Won some Yorkshire Cups, which is quite a bit of fun. So memories you don't forget about.
What would you say your best memory is of West Hull? You've gone to Australia, gone to France, you've been all around Yorkshire. What would you say you've got a standout memory there anywhere?
Probably that Australia tour. We spent 2 weeks over in Western Australia and played some good teams. I was about 13, 14 years old. And
did you win any?
Yeah, we won 3 out of 5. Narrowly got beat by a New Zealand select team, which is quite cool. They did the haka before the game, which is always quite exciting to be a part of. But no, we had a lot of success there. We got a lot of fun, a lot of good memories. Nice to get out. We went in about February time, so it was hammering it down with rain here in middle of summer in Australia, so it sounded quite well.
So would you say that you've learned a lot from Westall then, in your rugby career as much as your own life experiences?
Yeah, definitely. Westall's renowned for being a very good amateur team, but it's not just so much about the rugby. I had some great coaches who taught me a lot off the field as well as on it. They almost, it's more of a life coach than a rugby coach. And there's a lot of boys from that amateur team that have managed to play for England. More recently, Mikey Lewis and Jez Litton. Obviously, they came from Westall, and look at where they are now. It's a club that's known for having a lot of good success, and it's been very important to me.
What would you say that some of the key reasons were for a team like West Hull having such success for individuals as much as a team?
That's a good question. I think they stand out because it's like family. You know, it's in the heart of a pretty poor neighbourhood. I don't think they'd mind me saying. So, you know, we had a lot of boys that would come in with unmatching boots and, you know, ripped shirts but we made a bit of a family of ourselves, and we was always a bit of an underdog, you know, despite having a bit of success. You know, we go across to teams over in like Lancashire and Cumbria that, you know, were a bit more rugby union-esque, I suppose would be the right term. But no, it's all from the coaches, I think. You know, we had a lot of experienced coaches who had been in and around professional rugby, and to be able to pass their lessons on to amateur lads, you know, they're setting them in a good place for the future.
Okay, so moving forward now, you've been at West Hull for how long?
About 12, 13 years.
12, 13 years. Here's where your big move comes. Your first professional contract. You've been approached by Hull KR. You was born in West Hull, and you're a black and white. You were born a black and white at Hull FC.
I was, yeah.
What was it like how did you feel being a FC fan and you've just got the biggest rivals to offer you a contract? Was it a bit of like a mixed emotion feeling, or was it always denser?
No, it was strange at first. So it's like you say, I grew up as a Hull FC fan, but what Rovers came and offered me, I couldn't say no to. You know, I'd have been daft despite who you support. You know, at the end of the day, my dream was always just to play Super League, and to have a Super League club come in and offer me a contract. You know, I jumped at an opportunity. I never even thought about saying no.
What would little you have thought about in that moment, getting offered that? Could you ever see it happening? Did you always have confidence in yourself happening? Was you never in doubt, or was you completely shocked?
I was shocked. I was never the best kid at my amateur team, in all honesty. I always went a bit under the radar. You know, we used to have select games growing up, you know, 12, 13 years old, never even got picked for. So I always did kind of just slip under the radar. But I just, in my honest opinion and in my humble opinion, I think I just worked hard. So I was a bit shocked, but I was also happy. You know, I think that the younger version of me would have been proud, which means a lot to me now.
And how did you feel joining a new club? Were you scared? Were you nervous? Were you intimidated? Because you'll have watched a lot of these people on TV growing up. How did you feel moving into that team?
I remember the build-up, because it was in COVID when I signed, so I'd signed my contract, and I don't think we trained for about 3 months into it. So I remember I was nervous, I was a bit intimidated. You know, there's some big names in the team then. You know, I think Mossy Masoi was still around. Well, he was still around just. You know, you had some big international players and some big names that you was walking into. But from minute one, I loved it. You know, they were welcoming. It had that West Hull feel to it, which I was used to. It was a big family. It wasn't a successful team, I suppose, as it is now. You know, obviously they've just done the treble. When we signed, we finished last on the table. We stayed up just because of COVID. So it was a lot more of a family. You know, they cared about the youth, and it meant a lot as a young kid to be a part of that team because they were building for the future.
And would you say that there was anyone in particular that made you feel that like welcomed joining Rovers? Was it coaches or other players?
Yeah. Obviously, when I signed, Tony Smith was the coach, and he was brilliant. He was very good with all the young lads, and you know, because he's been a coach for about 20, 30 years, so he knows what it's like to be in that position. We had our captain Sean Kenny Dowell was brilliant. He'd played over in Australia for the last 15 years, so it was his first year abroad. So even though he was coming in as a big name and the big signing, I suppose, he was also new. You know, he'd never lived in England, he'd never been to Hull, so he kind of helped us get used to being in a professional team, and we helped him get used to being in England. So it was quite a nice balance.
And would you say that is one of the proudest moments in your career, if not the proudest?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just because you know what goes on behind the scenes and how hard you have to work to get there. You know, there's some days you don't really want to get up and put the work in, but you know, if you don't, then you know you won't be given the opportunities that I've had.
I have a bit of a funny one for you now. Obviously, you share a name.
I do. Yeah.
Quite a rugby league icon, you could say. Have you got any funny stories about that?
Yeah, I do. Funnily enough, I remember when I was just going in. This will have been 2024. I think we had a pre-season friendly against Featherstone or York, or I can't remember. And I'd bumped up, and I was going to play first grade. which was like really exciting. But I was on the same edge as Ryan Hall, so I think it went me, then Corey Hall, then Ryan Hall, and I remember whoever our halfback was at the time, it might have been Lenny, or I don't think it was Mikey, shouting like Hall, come with me, and all three of us just turning and looking at him, and it was a bit of confusion. We had to kind of come up with like little nicknames to remember who we were.
And what would you say that was like the biggest difference from Westall compared to Rovers? I know obviously it's a amateur team compared to a professional team, but what would you say like the key fundamentals are?
Just how professional it is. You go to Westall, you train for an hour, you'd have a laugh and you go home, which is good if you want to play at that level. It's all about having fun, but you come to Rovers and from minute one it's switch on. It goes from a hobby to a job, and I think your mindset when it does that has to flip, because you're playing and you're working for money. You've got expectations to meet.
And while you was at Rovers, did you encounter any problems? Did you have any injuries or anything like that?
Nothing major. I remember I broke my foot in January.
It's quite major.
It was quite major actually. I broke my foot in January of 2024, which was a bit of a nightmare. And then I spent about 8 weeks healing. Went back and on day one re-broke it, which was even more because I spent another 6-7 weeks out. So I probably spent about 4.5 months with a broken foot.
What was that road to recovery like? Was it, I'm assuming, daunting, but did you have people around you? Obviously you'll have had other players I'm sure were injured at the time.
Yeah.
What was it like having them players injured at the same time as you? Did you bounce off each other?
Yeah, we did, yeah. That helped a lot, but obviously you're in together for X amount of time a day, and then the rest of you, you're on your own, and it can be quite lonely world when you're injured. Watching everyone train and watching everyone get better and progress while you're kind of stood, stagnant. I did find it tricky mentally. It was hard to get back up in the ball running, mid-season by the time I'd come back and try and make a bit of an impact. But it's pack and parcel playing a physical sport, I suppose.
Would you say that it's made you into a better person mentally though, like your own person outside of sport? Would you say that it's been like a dark time you've gone through and you now know that you've got the determination and the grit to get back to something like that?
Yeah, definitely, because I probably didn't do everything right when I was injured. I did a lot of good stuff. I did all my rehab and made it back on the field and played again, but there's a lot of stuff I probably could have done better. I know if that ever comes around again, what I'd do to make myself even better, so I was even more ready.
So at this time, you was also at college. What was it like bouncing college with rugby league at the same time?
It was tricky as a young kid. At 16, 17, because all I wanted to do was play rugby. I just wanted to get out, play rugby, and I probably didn't care too much about my education. But now I'm a bit older. I'm still young. I'm only 20, but now I'm a bit older and I've had that experience. I know that there's a long life after rugby, and how important it is to get that balance between your education and rugby. But I found it tricky, trying to find time for both. But I took the time out when I could. The team was supportive and helping me with my education.
Okay, and I think it was around this time, around the end of college, start of university, because you went to university, didn't you? That you left Hull KR and got your move to Hunslet, which would have been your second professional contract. Can you tell me a little bit about how that move came about, firstly?
So I was one of our assistant coaches at Hull KR. Reese was called Reese Lovegrove, and he was head coach at Keighley, and his assistant coach at that time was now head coach at Hunslet. And I thought, as a young kid, the best move for me at that time was to drop down to part-time professional, just so I could get a degree as well, so I had a backup when I do retire. So Reese got me in touch with Dean at Hunslet, who had just been promoted to the Championship, so they'd had a really good year. We had a few conversations on the phone and met up, and I liked the feel of the club, so I signed a year contract.
Would you say that you and Dean at the time had a similar sporting interest, and do you think that played a big factor in the reason why you wanted to join?
Yeah, we had a very similar mindset. He was very rugby smart, he was a nice guy. I think he was a teacher as well as a coach. So, yeah, you know, he wasn't daft and he cared about his young players, and you know, he had a bit of a plan, which I always think is important as a sports team. You know, he had a 5-year plan, so I knew the club was going somewhere and it was going places, and I really felt like I could have been a part of that.
Yeah. And obviously that necessarily didn't plan out the way you maybe either of you expect it to go. So you left Hunslet and then you went on to, you've played a bit of university rugby, haven't you? How have you enjoyed that compared to the...
Yeah, it's been good. It's been a lot more of a relaxed environment. Obviously, the university rugby team is very successful. I think that we've only lost 1 game in 2 years or something like that. You know, we're a very good team, and it's a good standard. But I find it a lot more relaxed than like the professional setup, which I'm enjoying short term. It's nice to just be able to get the ball in your hands and have a bit of fun, have a laugh with your mates. But yeah, like I say, it's very different. You know, there's less expectations and you know stuff like that. But you know, I think it's easy to forget when you're young that you know you started playing the sport because you love it and you enjoy playing it. And I think it's important to go back to that and you know and just play the game because you love it.
Yeah. So where could you see yourself in 3 years? And I know you've had other offers or opportunities from clubs like Bradford Bulls. Do you think you could possibly see yourself at a club like that in the next couple of years?
Yeah, potentially. I just kind of take it, you know, week by week, month by month. You know, I've got a bit of a plan. You know, I do want to get back in a professional setup. To what capacity, I'm not sure yet. It just be whatever the right club feels like, you know. And if I fit in that environment, and you know, if they help me reach my goals, if I can, you know, have a bit of an impact in that team and help them reach where they want to get, it's very important to me. But yeah, we'll just see how and that comes about.
Well, that'll be everything for today. Thank you very much, Ryan. Hope you
No worries,
enjoyed.
mate. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been the Sports on Screen podcast. Goodbye.